What's up? I'm Cliff Chance, and I'm here to answer the question, is it any good? This video, we're going to talk about Stranger Things Season 3. I am going to try to keep this spoiler-free as possible. It's a little bit harder when you're talking about a 2-hour movie, or when you're talking about an 8-hour TV season, compared to a 2-hour movie, to try to keep it 100% spoiler-free, because there's just so much to talk about. But I'm going to do my best, and I probably will spoil a few things, but nothing major. But Season 3, it takes place probably about the summer after the events of Season 2. 11 and Mike are continuing on with their relationship, much to the dismay of Hopper, who has taken 11 in and kind of adopted her, or has adopted her as his daughter. Dustin's coming back from camp. It's right before the 4th of July. Nancy and Jonathan have internships at the local newspaper. Steve has a job at the local mall. And some Russians are trying to reopen the gate. And that lets the Mind Flayer back into our world. And that's pretty much all the plot without going into too much detail. Another show, it comes out almost 2 years after the last season, and I think they use that time wisely. I enjoyed this season a great deal, unlike another show that came out this year that waited 2 years to be released. I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones. But let's get in. There are a few bad, but for the most part good. I'm going to get in with the good right now. First of all, once again, they knock it out of the park with the nostalgia of the 80s. One thing that this season does, it reminded me of how fun going to the mall used to be when I was growing up, as opposed to now it just seems like, oh, I got to go to the mall. But, it reminds you what the mall used to be like. It used to be an experience, it used to be fun. But, they do rely heavily on the nostalgia, but it's not the only thing they rely on. Unlike another movie, criticizing something else that came out this year that tried to use the nostalgia of the 90s. And that's really all it had going for it, Captain Marvel. But with this, they don't just rely on the nostalgia. They have good characters, for the most part, really good stories that they tell. You care about the characters, so it's not the only thing that draws you into this world that they have going on of Hawkins, Indiana. One thing that they give us with this season focused heavily on relationships, whether it be friendships or significant others, romantic relationships. And they focus on like how easy it is to kind of grow apart. There's one scene in particular that I thought was very well done, and it's Lucas and Mike both have girlfriends now, and Will's kind of being pushed to the side a little bit. Not really, but he, it sees his toll, and he just, him and Mike have a little fight over it, and he brings up, it's like, what, do you think we're always going to be hanging out in the basement and that's the way life would be for the rest of our lives? It shows them growing up, and it affects the relationships, and even with a few of the other characters too, Hopper and, I'm drawing a blank, Joy, on their relationship. It focuses heavily on that, like, are they going to be more than friends, stuff like that. They do a good job of that. They do a great job with that, excuse me. Now, just get into it. Some of my favorite characters of this season. Hopper, he's always a fan favorite. I've enjoyed watching him through every season. He's been kind of like the unofficial badass of Hawkins, Indiana. This season, it starts off with him trying to be the reluctant father to a teenage girl. Well, not reluctant, he wanted to take her in. But now he's got to deal with the fact that he's fathering somebody that's in a relationship, turning teenager, and it kind of gets the better of him. He gives us some good scenes there. Lucas in this season is hilarious. Watching him try to give Mike love advice, because his relationship is like a week longer than Mike's and Eleven's relationship is, and he just trying to give Mike the wisdom on the relationships. I like Steve. Steve has very much become that character that you love to hate in the first season, to just the all-around hero that you're constantly rooting for. They've done a good job exploring that, bringing that, making him into just a better all-around character, giving him a lot of character development, I guess would be the way of doing it. Billy, who I thought was the biggest waste of space in last season. Thought he was a pointless character. He was there just to be a bully and really didn't bring anything else to it. And I don't know if this was their plan was, but they utilized him as like the primary host of the Mind Slayer. And I don't know if that was their plan last season. They introduced him, kind of just made him a bully, some sort of evil high school bully of the '80s. But they did a good job. Gave him more to do this season, and I very much enjoyed how they did it. And then Erica, Lucas's little sister, I thought she was hilarious. Beginning of the season, even last season, I didn't really much care for her. She was just kind of that annoying little sister. But then the more that they give her to do in this season, the better of a character she became. And then finally, even though he's only in it for about half the season, the conspiracy theorist, Murray, he was in last season, and he's in the second half of this season. Once again, he's just absolutely hilarious too. And I enjoyed all the scenes that he's in. For me, the plot of this season, it moves at a pretty decent pace. It does start off a little slow because you're reintroducing characters that you haven't seen on screen in almost 2 years, if you haven't rewatched the seasons before this one came out. But it's just showing where they are in their lives. But then once the action gets going, it doesn't stop. The final 4 episodes of this season are pretty much just suspenseful and action-packed. Characters constantly moving until we get to the grand finale of this season. I don't know if and it also has a good closure to the season. Like, it's one of those endings that I don't want it to end, but if this is where they end it, I'm happy with that because it gave me closure. But it does leave it open for a season 4, and I guess we'll have to wait another year or so to find out if they're going to be doing a season 4, which I'm sure they are. Now on to the mixed and the bad. I say bad. I mean, not all this stuff. It doesn't ruin the season, so I'm not looking at it as full-on bad. There are a lot of similarities between this season and the past seasons. One big example is the group becoming divided and then having to kind of all meet back up for the big final fight with the Mind Flayer. It's just very similar to seasons past like that. Some of the storylines in this can be kind of silly. Mainly, there's a group of teenagers taking on some Russians. Those Russians are kind of the big bad, other than the Mind Flayer of this season, as they're the ones trying to reopen the gate. And that's kind of a little cheesy, but then again, that's what '80s movies were. It was all about almost 1 in 4 movies was about some sort of teenager taking on the Russians in the '80s. So it's silly. But it also kind of takes you back to that time, those movies, the way they were made, the way they were written. And then also, the one thing that did kind of get on my nerves is there was one plot line that didn't get resolved. And I don't know why it was thrown in. Maybe it was to show Billy, to give you a sense of what Billy is like as a human. But they already did that in season 2. But he had tried to have an affair with Mrs. Wheeler, Mike's mom. But that just kind of starts, but then never goes anywhere, which has also been the big theme of some of her scenes, is how unhappy she is in her marriage. And I never get wrapped up, and it's getting a little tiring. At the end, I really enjoyed this season. I thought it was great. The laughs were big, the action was big, the suspense kept you on the edge of your seat. I'm going to give season 3 a 9 out of 10. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. And like and subscribe to the channel. Is it any good? And I'm Cliff Chance. Thank you.